Hello, my friend.
Hey, how's it going? There we
Uh,
go. We're good.
we're good. Yeah, apologies for that. I My camera died yesterday when I was streaming, and I had to like fix some things,
You're
and
grand.
so
Like, don't worry
I'm
about it.
you know how it is.
I
Making
know
the
how it
whole
is. Oh God, like half the streams I do is like tech support.
yeah.
It's
And
like,
so
okay, what's wrong?
and what would you like to? How would you like me to address you today? What do you go by?
Either Daniel or RT is fine.
What do you prefer?
Go with Daniel,
All
honestly.
right.
I feel it's more appropriate.
Awesome. And can you just so I have no idea what we're talking about today.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about like kind of anxiety, just mental health in general, kind of
Sure.
being a performer on a stage, but also with social anxiety is always
Oh
this
my God.
weird juxtaposition in my life. I'm very introverted and I'm very shy, and
Okay.
yet I've chosen this line of work.
Yeah,
Uh,
a lot of introverts do that. We may learn there's some really interesting statistics on that. But
it's weird though, isn't it? Because
yeah,
we're all so public and outspoken, and that when we're hiding behind a desk, and it's like, I know that even being on camera today and kind of face to face with you, it's like I'm shy even about that. And I know even getting ready for this, I was like adjusting my hair like for like full 15 minutes, and that's like, oh God, I gotta look nice.
and Daniel, do you want to just start by telling us where we can find you? I know you're a huge content creator, but what kind of
You're
content you
too
do?
kind.
Yeah,
I'm rtgame on Twitch and YouTube, play video games, live stream video highlights.
awesome.
Um, Clues in the name, game.
And anything in particular that you like to stream in terms of gaming? Like, what kind of stuff can people find if
Um,
they come and watch
we've
you? What can
recently,
they expect?
I mean, we've been torturing people in City Skylines. And we've also been building the entire Earth in Minecraft, so a bit of a mixed bag, you know? It's
Yeah,
like murder, but also nice creative
nice.
passion projects, you know?
Yeah, how is that? You're playing the new one, I assume, City Skylines 2?
No, it's not out yet, but I'm excited for
Oh,
it. It's later
okay,
this year.
okay,
Just
interesting.
kind of reliving the first one, yeah.
Got
Like
it.
kind of gearing on up for it.
Yeah,
Cannot wait till later in the year.
it's a game that I never really got into, but it
Oh,
seems
you're
really
missing
good.
out. No, it's a good fun one. Like honestly, it's just sandboxing, just kind of having fun and design shite. Love
Awesome.
it.
And I noticed you have an accent. Where are you from?
Dublin.
Okay.
I'm Irish. Uh, so it's like I always it's weird because whenever people pick up on the accent, I always feel like I have to give a disclaimer because this isn't really a Dublin accent. Um, just compared to like my peers that I know here, I'm Irish Canadian technically.
Hmm.
And I got just a lot of influence from my mum there. Lived in Ireland my entire life, but my accent's always been a bit scuffed.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's always like a weird disclaimer when people pick up on that because like, I don't want to say I'm Irish because then the Irish will be upset.
So it sounds like you think a lot about how to say things that don't
I
piss people
do,
off.
yes. That's the old social anxiety, you know. We
Yeah.
gotta spend a lot of time framing and making sure we
Yeah.
communicate it okay.
Yeah.
Don't want to
Okay.
step on any toes.
Of course. And so
Oh
there's a lot of
Jesus.
yeah, it's interesting, right? What is it like when I point that out to you? Does that make
Yeah,
things
I mean,
harder?
no, it's just pretty accurate because that's something I like to think I'm quite self-aware of stuff like that, and I try to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, no, you're right. Like that's just how I am. I'm the kind of person who I have to rehearse a phone call before I have it. And that's just social anxiety. You know, that's kind of how it manifests sometimes. I know that even for streaming as a career, like something I'll always go over is like if I have like a bit or something I want to do on the stream for like a while before the stream goes live, I'm like mentally preparing it, mentally preparing it, mentally preparing it, kind of going over and over. And I just can't help it. Like that's just how my brain operates, and it's almost like reassuring to do that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know that's just kind of like a bit of the old social anxiety. That's it manifesting. But it's just how my brain operates, and I'm just trying to be aware of it,
Okay.
more than anything.
Is it what is it like for your brain to operate that way?
Um, it's a bit panicked until I kind of calm myself down, is how it feels a lot of the time. I try to just practice a lot of like mindfulness and kind of just almost like awareness, for like the given moment and the situation. Because sometimes I'll stress about something like that when it's like I just need to say to myself, "You're fine. Just stop." You know? And it's like, and then I'm fine, and then I kind of get a hold of myself.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just something I've kind of always had. Like, it's just kind of how it manifests. Like,
Yeah,
but
I noticed that you make a lot of statements like, it's something I've always had. It's just the way that I am. It's the way that my brain
yeah, yeah.
operates. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, yeah, I always feel like the need to say that as well. It's just kind of being self-aware to it, you know. Like, is that because I know these habits myself.
Yeah.
Um, so I just try to pay attention to them. It's like I know some of them I'll try and like kind of correct or catch myself on to try and undo like kind of a mental trapping, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by that?
Um, Well, I mean, because sometimes I'm just anxious for the sake of it, and there's nothing to really be anxious about, you know? And it's like my brain just overworks itself, and it's turning a mile a minute. And sometimes I'm just have to be like, cop on, like,
Yeah.
and it's almost like kind of a stern word with myself there, but it is oddly reassuring, to kind of have that because I just catch myself on it, you know?
What
And it's like
what
sometimes I just kind of need that.
uh what do you mean by oddly reassuring?
Because I'm calling myself out on my habit, you know? And it's like it's something that I know that's like that's just part of how my brain operates. But reminding myself of that fact kind of helps
Hmm.
because like it's not so much that like I'm doing something wrong here, or it's like no, it's more so that this is the way my brain is kind of just functions, and has always been, you know? It's just acknowledging it for what it is rather than just kind of like because sometimes like if I'm getting anxious and that I'll like also guilt trip myself. It's like how dare you be anxious in this moment, you know, and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Which is like I just want to avoid that because that's not productive. That doesn't help anything.
Okay.
So just acknowledging that my brain is wired this way and has always been wired this way, you know, and just kind of learning to live with that and manage that rather than kind of being harsh or negative towards myself, about my own person, you know. Because I think
Yeah.
that's just healthier in general. You know, there's no point beating myself up.
Yeah. So I'm noticing that when you feel anxious, which is a given, by the way, right?
Absolutely. Like, unfortunately for our sake here, being on camera always makes me anxious.
Okay.
It's always been a thing. There's a weird irony in it just from doing this publicly. And also, I know that just recently I had a big stream where I was literally in front of a camera for like 5 hours in front of like just a massive green screen studio and recording effects and stuff. No anxiety there. Confidence was fine, for the most part. But it's like just sitting down in front of like my desk and almost chatting. It's like I feel a little more anxious about that, but I'm doing okay.
What about confidence? You mentioned that green screen. Confidence was okay. Is confidence not okay in situations like this?
Sometimes it's a bit shaky. It's just kind of reassuring myself. Like I can feel it sometimes, like it kind of wells up. Like when I get anxiety, it's kind of like in my chest and it kind of like brews up a bit and it feels like a bottle overflowing, is how I would describe it. But it's just kind of calm myself down and it's like, actually, no, you're fine. It's like nothing's really overflowing. It's just kind of steady. And you just kind of like, it's calming.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So it sounds like you reassure yourself a lot.
I do reassure myself a lot, yeah. I mean, it helps me quite a bit. Apologies if you can hear an ice cream van, by the way, at the moment. He always comes around at this hour. Don't
Yeah.
know if he came up.
Is it okay if we hear an ice cream van?
I can move the mic closer to the window if you want. I've never been able to catch him because, like, the bastard always comes around every time I'm, like, sat down to stream. And it's like, I'll just go live and it's like, there he is again. I've never caught him once.
Do you want ice cream from him?
I wouldn't say no.
Yeah, sounds cool. I think
Oh,
we
Jesus.
don't see too many ice cream trucks nowadays, but occasionally they're there.
Ah, no, they're all for it here in Ireland. Like it's, I think it was raining like half an hour ago as well, so I'm surprised the fucker's here. But here we are. Am
How's
I
the
allowed to swear? Sorry,
Yeah,
I should have checked that. Okay.
you being you, I think.
Sorry, no, because I've watched some past ones. Like I know with Michael Reeves and that, like you know, he swore like a sailor a bit. Um,
Yeah,
but just making sure that's still the case before I
I mean,
start cursing violently
yeah, it's whatever you want to do. I mean, as long
and
as we
stuff.
don't violate terms of service or TOS,
Yes,
just
no, we should be fine. We should be fine.
um yeah, so Daniel, you've already given us so much stuff. It's like so rich. So I'm hearing,
Oh
there's a
Jesus.
lot of what was that? What is oh Jesus?
No, just like say that like I've already given so much. It's like, ah, God, just kind of exclaiming on it.
And what was the
Sorry, like,
explanation?
sorry, the Irish mannerisms are coming out a bit. We're always like that. We kind of just feel the need to remark on a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Like, ah, Jesus. Ah, wow. Like,
Can you help me understand what is the direction of that remark? Is that concern or positivity or just
I just think it's kind of funny. Because
okay?
like it's just like because I'm here and like I've been chatting about like and we're trying to unpick my brain a bit and it's like we're 10 minutes in. It's like, wow, there's a lot clearly here. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh
no.
no.
I mean, and the reason I think there's a lot is because you are very self aware,
Ah, you're too kind.
right?
Um,
And so I think it's like you've already figured a lot of this stuff out. You figured out that you have sort of a baseline function. You figured out that you can react to that anxiety in a couple of ways. So before we get to react, we can talk about you figured out that there's certain environments that will evoke it or certain
yes.
environments that won't evoke it. You figured out that you can react towards it in two different ways. Sometimes you're judgmental, right? And this is where you
Mm,
can feel guilty and beat yourself up, or you can acknowledge it. And you found that acknowledgement leads to sort of reassurance and calming of the anxiety. And you kind
it
of have to
does.
talk to yourself.
Yes.
And it sounds like you've gotten pretty good at that.
I'd like to think so. Yeah. I mean, it's trying to be more aware of it, like especially in more recent years and that, because like God, when did I first like start therapy? Like it would have been, I want to say 2017, but for like most of my life, like it was kind of just like, nah, I'm not doing that, like it couldn't possibly be me that needs it. Just very much like even to comment on some of that, just for some of the background, like stigmas in Ireland, unfortunately, we're always a bit behind with mental health and kind of just like being more public and open about it. Like we've come a long way in recent years in particular, but even like 10 years ago, like it was like almost like the answer to most like kind of mental health problems would just be, would you not man up? Which is not very productive and doesn't help much.
Hmm.
So it takes us all a bit to get there. I would say in this country compared to most, just because it's not really been a conversation.
Interesting.
I know, yeah, like I like it's definitely a bit of a change. Like I know even kind of talking to my parents about mental health and stuff like that. Like I've only been able to approach that in recent years. And
Okay.
before then, it's just like it's almost like it's a pressure that's like can't talk about it, just got to deal with it. And again, not healthy, not productive in the slightest to anyone.
Okay.
Um, I think that's almost like a product of an Irish cultural thing, though. Um,
I'm fascinated by that. Do you
really?
feel
Okay.
comfortable talking about that in can I ask you some questions about that? Like
Sure.
I'm
I mean,
so
go
curious
for it.
about
Yeah, let's go.
the culture and so Daniel, can you tell us just a little bit about like what growing up was like for you? Like so you grew up in Ireland, right?
Grew up in Ireland, yeah. I mean, I was a very shy kid. I had very little confidence in person. I had a few close friends. Um, but it was like very quiet. I was deathly afraid of talking almost all the time. I kind of just kept my head down and studied all the time, like when I was just kind of studying for school and shit. Um, like it was very kind of uneventful, and like I would say that like I used to be very quiet and very and deathly shy to the extent I really wouldn't do anything, and I knew it always kind of made me unhappy too, because I kind of felt like even as a kid that life is kind of passing me by, like grandiose notions to be having when you're like a little kid. But I eventually kind of snapped out of that and I kind of had a bit more of a realization that, hey, life's short, so let's try and undo some of those habits.
Hmm.
Would kind of be some of the upbringing. Like for in a more wider like Irish cultural sense, uh, slagging is very much a thing there. Kind of just like making fun of each other. And it's rampant in kind of just like, especially like just kind of growing up in Ireland. It's kind of what we do because
Hmm.
like we learn to laugh at life as part of like kind of our culture and just our people. Because I mean, for the Irish and their history, that's what they've kind of had to do because it's all a bit depressing.
Can you tell
So
us
it's
about
very
that?
well, I mean, just Irish history in general, just like colonial history and shit. Like I really got kind of going like kind of quite far back, and just the Irish having a bit of a bad time, through the years. So I know, like I know this just from my granddad and like kind of my dad and that, because he would have got it from him and so on and so forth. It's like you kind of have to almost laugh a bit at life to be able to process it in some capacity. And I think that is just part of our culture that's kind of gone on through the years. Like it's still prevalent even now. And I think it's still a good thing to have to laugh at life a bit. but then sometimes also to treat it with a bit more kind of seriousness and gravitas is also kind of important, and we're kind of suck at that bit because of this whole cultural thing.
Hmm.
So it's a bit harder, but we're getting there. We're getting there. It's a lot better than it was, to say the least.
Uh, and so it sounds like you had you said that life was kind of passing you by. What were you noticing you weren't taking? What parts of life were you missing out on?
Oh God. I mean, I felt like all I would do is just play video games and nothing else. I would play video games, I would study for school. And then I went into uni as well. Like, I could tell that like I had passion for certain subjects, but I had no idea what to do with any of it. So it kind of just felt like, what am I doing? I'm kind of just existing. Um, the wake up call for it, I guess to go into it a bit as well, it might help at picking apart the old brain and that. But in 2015, I suffered from a collapsed lung, of all things. Yeah, and it was like scary. It happened out of the blue. Apparently quite common if you're just a tall, skinny lad.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've got the
And
right body type for a
yeah,
collapsed lung, spontaneous
yeah,
pneumothorax.
yeah, and it was a bit shy. And it was pretty rough as far as a collapsed lung goes because it actually had collapsed for 4 days until it was treated. So I was actually gradually being oxygen starved, which was quite unfortunate to learn. Because they discharged me from the hospital almost immediately because the guy said, "Oh yeah, you're fine, you can go home," when I really shouldn't have been let home. And I got like a frantic call when I was in college from my dad saying, "You're supposed to be operated on now, you know." It's like, what? And it was like almost shocking. And I was with all my friends at the time, and I remember like because we had like a meetup for our college society, and I was just like casually like, "I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be in hospital right now. I gotta go," which was wild. So I mean that they patched me up, that they fixed it. But ever since that, I was like, shit, that was kind of scary, and that was kind of harrowing on my physical health. That could have been really bad if they didn't weren't able to treat me as quick as they were, ultimately. So from that on point on, it was kind of like, right, I'm gonna try and live a bit more, and I got a lot more confidence from that. And it was like a very noticeable change after that. Like I started being way more social. I could just tell that like I kind of clicked better with people in person too. Like my social anxiety like is still very much there, but it was significantly worse before that moment. And it was kind of that like almost like life is short that kind of came from that kind of moment of pain.
Yeah,
That really did it for me and really helped me a lot. Like in retrospect, like it's a weird thing to say. In retrospect, it's the best thing that probably ever happened to me is having that lung collapse because it really did a 180 on me and my life.
yeah. How does that work? What
I
was the
know, right?
180? Like what?
I know, because you
What,
think like,
bro?
well, maybe you could do the 180 without the lung giving out, and you'd hope so. But it's just what it took for me in the moment, because it was just kind of God, like this was actually really bad, and it kind of just got me thinking about larger sum of life and my own shyness and stuff like that. Where it's like, God, I could have just. It got me to fix in on like passions and stuff like that. Maybe the better way to put it.
Can
And
you
like,
help us understand like what happened in your mind? So like so I get that there's some vague sense of
yeah,
my mortality,
yes,
right? But like
yes.
how does that translate into like what are the steps that improved your anxiety?
I mean, from that, from that being social was a huge thing. So, like, I was involved with a college society, but I was very shy and reserved even in that society. Immediately after the lung collapse, I threw myself into it. I made a shitload of new friends. Just like it was almost immediately, and they were all scared shitless for my well-being at the time. And I remember still, I was kind of playing it off still because I'd be like still trying to come into college like a few weeks after. It's like, yeah, I'm fine. Just like walking incredibly slowly down the hallway because I can't go faster than that. But it really changed it. It just, I don't know. It was something about the whole life is short and something bad could have happened here. Thinking about my own mortality, that was a very good and healthy thing for me because I could always tell that I was kind of just unhappy up until that point. And I knew it like because I'm kind of just being quiet all the time. I don't really know what I'm doing. After that moment, it was like fuck it. I'm tossing myself into it. I'm gonna give it an honest shot, and my confidence just like soared through the roof. Like it helped a lot. And again, it's a weird thing because normally, if you're thinking about mortality and that the old existential dreads on the brain, and it's normally a bad thing. Um, but I know for myself that it's almost kind of like a more positive thing because it kind of helps motivate me weirdly.
How so?
Um, well, because life is short, is how I try and like think about it. So, if you're gonna you want to try and make the most of it. You want to try and make the most of your time. And so for me, for a lot of the times, I'd be kind of crippled with anxiety. So indecision would reign quite heavily on me. So I wouldn't be able to decide to do something because, oh, but what this, but what that, but what of all these possible consequences, kind of playing out scenarios in my brain. But with the almost mortality like kind of placed in front of you, it's like, fuck it. You don't have time to think about all these. You might as well just give it a shot. And so I just start giving things a shot more. And it helped. And so instead of like kind of like being trapped in like anxious loopings in my mind, I would just be like, fuck it, we're doing this. And just giving things an honest go. And it just did wonders for me since then. Yeah, it's weird just even in retrospect now. It would have been like 8 years ago. But because I don't even remember like most of like my life in university and shit like that before then. It just feels alien and different. But I remember everything past that from like my third year on was just wonderful and fantastic.
Hmm. Fascinating. Can I just think for a second?
Yeah, work away.
Do you still have existential dread?
Absolutely. Oh God, all the time.
Tell us about that.
I mean, just thinking about life and thinking about direction and where's it all going. Am I making the most of like time in that? But like it's a bit different now. It's not so much existential terror where it's like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. It's more so, yeah, we're gonna die, but we can do something in that time. We've got a long while here, and there's a lot of good stuff worth doing in that time too. It's kind of how I look at it. Like I know from some of my chat that like just crossing over, I can see the emote. We have like an existential dread emote in my Twitch chat. The little sweating shamrock with a smile. That's what that's from. Like I know even on stream I'll kind of like even I'll joke about that and like I'll joke about how old I'm getting and stuff like that. Um, but I'm fine with that as well. I'll still get like kind of little bouts of it where it's kind of bad. But for the most part, it's good and it's almost reassuring, is how I would look at it.
What
Um,
reassures you about death?
Such a morbid way to ask.
No, I mean,
Oh
but
God. Um, I mean, it's like an end in sight at some point. I want to make sure I phrase this right as
nope,
well.
phrase it wrong.
Because no, because I don't want this to be anxiety inducing. But I mean, it's a joy in kind of getting older and kind of living life and that, And you learn to kind of look back at things and you learn to appreciate things in that moment a lot more. Because rather than kind of stressing about, it's like, oh God, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. You kind of feel with a sense of, I did this today and I had a good time with it. And it's like, I enjoyed the time I spent today. And it's like, and also with that existential dread, there's a sense of like, right, what am I gonna do tomorrow so I can make the most of this? And there's almost something kind of comforting and kind of organizing yourself along that way. And kind of the feedback loop is almost like you make some plans, you fulfill those plans, and then it feeds back in your brain. It's like, that was a good day. Whereas before it was just like, nothing is organized, everything is chaos. Oh God, what do I do? Is kind of how it felt.
And
And then
what
anxiety,
what made it hard for you to pick something to do before?
indecision, anxiety.
Yes.
Like
So what made it hard for you to make that decision?
it's almost like having, I mean, it's like having several different options on like a restaurant menu and just having to pick one and knowing that you're going to miss out on all the other ones. And you spend so long trying to actually decide and pick a damn meal that you end up forgetting to order. Is how I would maybe describe it. I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm trying to find the right way to kind of phrase it or like kind of voice it. It's tricky. Um, but it definitely has helped.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So Daniel, I love this dude. So
Okay.
don't I want to try to reassure you if that's okay.
Oh yeah, no, you're all good.
So I think what you're giving us is pure gold, and I think it is going to. This is maybe a little bit highfalutin, but I think
Okay,
it's going to revolutionize people's perspectives on anxiety.
let's go.
So here's the problem, right? So we think that like conquering anxiety is through like good stuff, like we can like
Yeah.
believe in ourselves. but I think that what so there's something really transformative. So like there are a couple things. So this is where I kind of don't want to blow my load too early, but this is kind of where I am. So
Fuck it, let's go.
so because here's the thing, you say that this is the way my brain is, right? This is how I am, but that's changed drastically. You get that?
I mean, I do, like, in comparison, like before and after the whole collapsed lung scenario. Like, yes, I know that's adjusted a lot.
Yeah, right. So like the first thing is that you assume. So this is, man, this is so great, Daniel. There's so many things that you do that are both good and paradoxically, like I think, kind of hold you back in some ways, because we sort of
More
think
than
about,
likely.
we think about the progression of anxiety to be like this kind of upward thing, but if we really like listen to your story and we think about what has helped you, right? We don't medically recommend go get a spontaneous pneumothorax if you've got an anxiety disorder, right?
Just go have your lung deflate. Go on.
But what I think we can really learn if we pay attention is, if we understand it's not the experience itself, it's how the experience interfaced with you.
Yeah.
And what we can sort of elucidate is like, how did it affect you? And then if we understand what those pieces are, we can help other people do that without having a spontaneous pneumothorax. Does that make sense?
Which is preferable. Yes.
Which is absolutely preferable. And then I think there's just so much good stuff here, because there's also this sort of this idea that you've accepted that this is the way that you are, and that helps you get through a temporary crisis, right?
Yeah.
By reassuring yourself. But paradoxically, I think you could be almost shooting yourself in the foot, because we actually have good data that shows that you were a certain way and that can drastically change. So can you actually drastically change again? And what would that look like?
Well, it's not even drastic change, though. I mean, living is just constant state of change more than anything. We're always kind of growing and developing. But yeah, like I see what you mean. Like, kind of paying attention more to that is definitely will do me good, rather than just kind of accepting the status quo. It's like, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
Guess I'll just let it
right.
happen and ride it out. But it's like trying to change like the process of it and the result outcome.
Yeah. So I'd say, first of all, living life has changed. Like, you weren't living life before, you were existing.
Yeah, more or less.
Right?
Yeah,
you were over here, and life was living. People were living life over here, and you were over here. And then you stepped into the flow of life, and then everything's bumpy, right?
Yeah.
And something about being able to jump into the river sort of like made the anxiety go away, and or you had to have the anxiety go away before you jumped in the river, which is what's tricky, right?
No, for sure.
And then there was one other thing. Oh, yeah. So I recently saw a study that I thought was really fascinating, that people who develop very strong emotional coping mechanisms tend to not progress in life.
Okay.
And it's kind of weird, right? Because you think like
ingrained in the habit almost, is it?
Well, so I think what happens is if I'm in a bad situation, let's say I'm in an abusive relationship, and I get really, really good at coping.
Yeah.
Am I more likely to stay in the relationship or less likely to stay in the relationship?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a fair point then, because if you're just trying to cope all the time, then you're just going to fall in almost that habit loop, and it's like, whereas staring you in the face is like, hey, maybe you should get out of this, maybe it's better. Like,
yeah, absolutely, it's really bizarre. Like I was stunned when I saw the study, but like there's really, they were talking about how the better you are at coping, the more likely you are to stay stuck. And I've seen this with patients of mine where, like, they'll come in and after a couple of years, they're like, hey, I need more coping skills. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the right choice. Like, I don't think you need more coping skills. I think your life needs to be different. Like, I don't think if that's what you want, that's what I'll help you with. But I don't think my job here is to allow you to level up your coping to the point that you can handle any situation. I think it's to help you no longer need to cope, right? That's the
Yeah, just
real target.
get you out of some of those situations or the mental trappings that are leading you into those situations more so, yeah. Um, no, like it's just maybe something to bring in here. I'm not sure if it's something you'd be familiar with, but like a book I've actually been reading recently, Dr. Judson Brewer, I think, Unwinding Anxiety, has been fantastic because he's kind of presenting a lot of that argument where it's like he's trying to undo the habit, and he's like kind of like I'm not going to be able to do it justice here, but it's just like it's an example, like it's what you said there, and it's like trying to almost pay awareness to it and kind of that situation rather than just trying to manage it best you can, almost engineer it so that mentally you're in a lot better prepared and in better situations for yourself.
Yeah, Judson Brewer
Um,
is fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah. I haven't read the book myself, but I'm sure it's great. I'm very
Ah, it's
familiar
been
with a lot of his work.
fantastic.
So is it okay if I ask a couple more? I'm going to get some more. Do you have any questions for me?
No, fire away. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm happy to chat.
Let me, you doing okay?
I'm good. Yeah,
You feeling like nervous or whatever?
a little bit, but it's kind of like it's settling now. That's the
Okay.
thing. Because that's the thing is, I'm always a bit anxious and on edge whenever I sit down to do anything like this. But once I get into it, it's like I'm fine.
Okay.
So I just ride it out a bit.
Man, that whole thing with the spontaneous pneumothorax is fascinating, dude. Like, it's like, that's,
I know, right?
yeah.
I still can't sleep on my left side to this day. Just from it. I definitely need to get some physiotherapy at some point because I kind of just started putting up with that after a certain point. I can't do it because I feel like I'm suffocating, which is weird. Never been able to. 8 years on.
What's that like?
It's not great. Sometimes I roll over in the night and I feel like I'm choking.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I definitely, I've some physio ahead of me. I'm very much aware. But I've also know that like whenever I sleep, I've gotten very used to just sleep in a particular way, which again is kind of like almost like it's just what you're saying, like mentally almost coping. That's like a physical example of it. Here's me coping physically so I don't just, suffocate in my sleep. Should just get it checked out, It'd be easier.
How does that, do you mind if I ask a personal question?
Go for it.
How does that affect like relationships?
What, not being able to sleep on my left
Yeah.
side?
Does that make sleeping with people weird?
I mean, do you just positions on the bed, like you make sure you can face them or you're facing the edge of the bed? Is that what you're going for?
Well, I'm curious, right? Because it seems like it's kind of it's like a pretty big, it's like you're playing that game with a handicap. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can't.
Oh god, chat's reaction to this is fucking great. Yeah, so you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, I mean I'm just curious because like these are the kinds of things. So
You're curious, are you, doctor?
Yeah. I mean, so this is what you learn. Like, so being a doctor, like what I learned is that the impact. So when we think about something like a spontaneous pneumothorax, we can reinflate your lung. But I've noticed that one of the biggest problems in medicine is we don't really understand how conditions. I'm 100% serious. How conditions like
for sure.
impact people's like other parts of their life. Like it has never crossed my mind that someone with a spontaneous pneumothorax could actually have problems like in their romantic relationships because and like that's like a huge part, right? Like being able to like move around while you sleep. And forget about romantic, just being able to like sleep comfortably is like huge.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I have to be very particular with that. Like I know even like kind of physical health and that for exercise and it's always an issue lifting weights. What I do more than anything is mainly just lift weights because I'm always just trying to like make sure I have some upper body strength more than anything. So just in particular, I can't lift shit with this arm.
And
Or like above my head now.
And is that because of this?
I mean, I think it's because I think it's like a mix of things. Because like it's weird because if I exercise too much, I always feel pressure in my lung.
Huh.
Is how I would describe it. And again, I always wonder about that. And I definitely know I have some physio ahead of me. Like my doctor has recommended that too. I just need to go and actually organize it at some point. I've kind of just got a bit too comfortable just kind of putting up and accepting that again as well. Whereas like maybe I should just check that out and not be in pain. Like
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Was that did I overstep with that personal question? Like,
No,
you
you're
know,
grand. No, you're
I mean,
grand. Don't worry. It was just quite funny, phrasing in that.
uh, you know,
You're grand.
I wasn't
It's
asking questions
important.
about your penis. Like,
You don't have to be specific.
no, but I'm saying,
Uh,
like,
sh-
I thought that was
my
anyway.
so my next stream after this is gonna be like my chat's gonna be. It's like, hey, I saw you on Doctor K. I saw he was asking about your dick. It's gonna be.
No, I'm just talking about sleeping positions. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
Yes,
not.
no, yes, no, of course, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, so
It's grand. It's grand.
back
We're
back
all
to
so in the same.
anxiety and the existential debt of
Yes.
breath of sorry, fear of death.
Yes, let's go.
Okay. Um, you have questions for me, Daniel? Anything about this kind of like resonate with you, or that you're kind of curious about? Like, what do you want to talk about?
Um, I mean, I'm happy to kind of unpick sort of like what you think of like the whole Irish cultural thing on like kind of even mental health and that through the years and how it's again we have a philosophy that's kind of helpful but then also kind of not because I think laughing at life is quite a valuable thing to do. That almost like a good way of processing emotions. But obviously, I mean the way Ireland has kind of done it. And it says weird even saying that because it's not like yes, Mr. Ireland taught us this, but no, it's like a societal way of handling it. So it's kind of difficult with mental health in some capacities. Like men's mental health is in the shitter in this country, like it just is. And that's just a cultural thing. It's getting better, but it's been very bad.
Can you tell me more about men's mental health in Ireland?
I mean, people just don't talk about it. Like it's hard even with like kind of like close, genuine friends to open up about that kind of thing or even be vulnerable. And it's like there's very much a sense like, oh no, I'm grand, I'm grand. Don't need to talk about that. No, don't worry about it. It's like we almost all like repress it. And I know that even like speaking to some of my close friends and that when they're clearly going through shit, it's hard to kind of just get through them and be like have them be vulnerable or kind of be there for them because we all just isolate ourselves.
So I'm going to ask you some
Go
stupid
for it.
questions.
Didn't say
So
personal that time.
I didn't. um, so, but why do you need to talk about it? Why do you correlate not talking about it or being vulnerable with things are bad?
Because it's healthy, ain't it, to kind of talk about it?
I mean,
Or like especially when like shit's hitting the fan, it's nice to be able to have someone lean on them and be like, listen, I'm actually not doing that well in the head. And I know I'm thankful for my friends and that, because I do I do feel like I can do that with them. But I know that sometimes I even feel it in myself. I'm like, no, I don't want to bother them. Don't want to bother them. And the closest form of kind of almost talking about it that we'll get is kind of like a friend group or culture would be like joking about it or slagging about it. It's like, Jesus, wasn't that terrible? Like, like it's like here's one that I know, right? And it's like it kind of says it. Um, my dad, when his mother passed away, my grandmother passed away. How I mean, he kind of processed it in that kind of almost jokey way. And I remember we were just out at the funeral, and then like I asked like, Dad, how you feeling? And it's like, and his response was, Jesus, she's not looking well in there. It's like, dude, like your mum just passed. And it's like I want to make sure that he's actually all right. Um, but that kind of says it though, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, you can't like even then. That's quite a serious one. It's like maybe we should chat, you know?
but
Like it says it.
was your dad? So this is what I'm going to kind of push you on this for a second. So, what are the signs that things aren't going well?
Oh, now what do like just
So like how like
meant?
I'm with you, right? So that's
Yeah.
drastic. Seems crazy, right?
Oh,
You,
yeah.
you know, like your mom just passed away, and you're like, wow, she's not looking great. I can't
It's like
do the.
bloody hell, like because I understand, laughing at life and coping with it, but like, Jesus.
Yeah. So, but how do you know that men's mental health isn't good? How do you know that that's not sufficient?
Well, because I mean, I just see like friends and family just struggling more than anything, and a lot of
What
the time it's just because they don't talk about it.
what do you see?
Um, with just like stress, kind of isolated, not getting a whole like not communicating or like not reaching out. It's like it'll be times where like a friend is just clearly in a lot of trouble and just life's not going too well, and you can kind of see it. Um, but you can't really be there for them. They're like emotionally unavailable. And it's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna toughen up and I'll be grand. And it's like, maybe you don't always need to toughen up. Maybe it's good to just chat about it sometimes. You
I,
know,
I mean,
because I mean, I know from experience, the times I chat about that stuff with my friends, it's fucking miles better than just not saying anything. So it's from experience there that I would know that, like, yes, it really helps to just chat about shit. And even things like I know some friends, like God love them, where they'll be like, oh no, I don't want to go to a therapist, and I've never been to one in their life, and it's like, what what are you doing? Like you'd go to the doctor if your leg was hurt. Like it's that kind of scenario. I know it's a bit of irony there, me with my old lung, and I still haven't fucking treated it. But
when did you first go see a therapist?
it would have been 2017 or 2018. I can't remember when exactly,
Okay,
but it
no,
would have
that's
been
fine.
about then.
I just
I
needed
think
to know
that
if it was before or after 2015.
Yeah, it was after. It was after because being much more aware of that and kind of just living, it was just like, maybe I should like kind of try and unpack some of this baggage that sometimes eats away at me, And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go talk to someone who's professionally trained to handle my shit, you know?
Yeah.
And like, listen,
So, Daniel, can you tell me about toughening up? You've mentioned that, people will say man up, toughen up.
yeah.
Tell me about that.
I mean, it's just the expectation that like be fine and dandy, otherwise you're bothering people. I don't know. Like, it's the sense that you kind of get here, or you did before. Now I'm growing up a bit since then. Um, but it's just like if you have an issue, you just got to deal with it, and you're not allowed to be emotional about it or anything like that. You just have to get stronger, overcome problem, and be normal again, which is not healthy at all. It's really toxic. Uh,
Where does that pressure come from? Like, what do, like, I'm going to ask
it's
you.
nowhere. Yeah, because it's not anyone in particular. Like that's the thing. Like it is a cultural thing. Like someone's even saying it in chat, as sure it'll be grand. It's grand, which is like one of our most beloved phrases in Ireland. That'll be grand. Oh, that's terrible, but be grand. And that's how we just kind of process it, rather than actually kind of unpacking and trying to actually more appropriately deal with like a situation that's unfolding. Like be grand. Don't worry about it.
And what makes it, what is the negative consequence? Like, so what do people, when people are sort of like
Hmm.
telling themselves or each other that I should toughen up, I should man up, what is the consequence if they don't do that? What are people trying to avoid by toughening up?
I mean, I think for a lot of us, it's just afraid of feeling weak or insecure, It's like, God, I was emotional about that and I didn't process it well. That's embarrassing. I think it's some of that sense. So I think that's like the fear. It's like, if I don't toughen up, I'm going to be emotional about this. And have to deal with it then. And like, God, I just can't handle that. Whereas like sometimes if you just if you're a bit more aware and you have a good old cry, then you get some of it out of your system almost, or like a good old just chat with a friend.
So expressing emotion that
Yeah.
is not positive means you're weak.
Yes. Yes. That's how I would kind of describe it. Where it's a bit of a shame. Again, we've come a long way with it since in Ireland. I would like to think. I know in more recent years and that, like even the idea of having those conversations with friends and family is like they're much more open to it, which is
Yeah.
great. I can actually confide in them about stuff there too now. But it was very rough. I know in my like just in like school days and stuff like that.
Can you tell me a little bit
Um,
more about that?
I mean, sure. I mean, I know just for a lot of the time. I mean, a lot of it from manifesting in school, like people would either be like bullied or just troubling, like having difficulties with just education system in general, and just have literally no support for it. And they just be like, "Well, you're on your own, and if you don't get the grades, you're fucked." And parents disappointing in you, all that jazz, basically. And like not actually providing that kind of like more healthy support, where it's like, hey, let's just help you process this a bit better and like what's wrong. No one ever really asking that question. It's just more of a consensus like, you'll be grand. Just figure it out. You'll be grand. A lot of grands,
Yeah. And
which is not great.
what's the downside of being emotional? Like, why do people think that that is bad? Do you have a sense of that?
Again, I mean, I think some of it is just it's coming at like just being a bit insecure with your feelings or like not having yourself put together. I mean,
Okay.
we still have those, we have those stigmas in our world. Where it's like, the well put together individual, and it's like, and you're almost not allowed to have that kind of weakness. Now, again, miles better in recent years. We've made a lot of progress there. It's okay. It's more and more okay, being more normalized. Um, but definitely like 10 years ago, like, no, that was not the case.
So
And being public about that was very hard.
I'm gonna tie together a couple things that I heard, Daniel, and let me know if you
Go
think
for it.
this is good or not good. So I'm kind of noticing that if you don't handle your own stuff
Yeah.
and you show it to other people, it becomes their responsibility. And then you're kind of burdening them.
I mean, that's the feeling of it. Yeah.
And so I also noticed you mentioned, like, you don't want to be a burden to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is just a cultural thing here, unfortunately. Like, no
And
one wants to bother anyone.
is that particularly true of men?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it has to be. I mean, I think it's just true for everyone, but I mean, men always struggle with that in general. I don't think that's a mystery, you
Why do
know?
you think that is?
I mean, it's just kind of like culture, upbringing,
Sure. So
just media.
when you think of a man, what do you see?
So, you know the Chad meme where it's the guy with like the chiseled beard and that, and the rock hard abs, and it's like just staring intently off into the distance. Like, that's it. That's what we're all striving for.
Yeah, so I noticed one thing that's interesting about the Chad meme is the Chad meme is always alone,
Yes, he is. It's
right?
very appropriate.
It's kind of interesting because, like, yeah, there's like the beard and the musculature and the smile or the
There's no
confidence,
one
and
there.
and there's no one around them, and so I also wonder a little bit about Irish culture. I kind of wonder, and now I'm sure there's thousands of people out there who have PhDs and understand this stuff way better
Mm.
than we do. But what I'm kind of hearing from you is that Ireland has a culture of resilience, of coping,
Yeah.
of survival.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you look at almost the historical context for the Irish. They've just been through a lot of shit through the years. So it's like learning to laugh at life is almost part of that coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because if we don't laugh at it, we're just gonna cry, Jesus, it's already got enough on our plate.
And so I'm kind of noticing that I could imagine that when your culture has is subordinate to some like a different culture, right? So that's what's happened a lot in Ireland,
Yeah.
and happened in India and stuff too. That sort of surviving and pulling your own weight becomes important because you don't want to burden other people because it's not
Yes.
everyone has to get through it and everyone has to carry, like, we all have to
Yeah.
carry our weight, right?
Yeah,
And
basically. So
and if
you don't.
can't
I don't want to give you more to
yeah,
carry when you've
because
already got your own shit going on.
and there's almost like the things cannot get better. They just have to be tolerated, right?
Yes.
That's why we laugh at life. It's like there's no way to improve things. We just have to take it as best as possible.
Yeah. And it's just a coping mechanism for that. When it's like, but maybe we don't always just have to take it. Maybe it's a bit healthier for the old brain to actually untangle a little bit, confide in someone and actually discuss that. It's like it's just better for everyone. Like, we don't have to have this mentality that like, well, everyone's suffering, so I can't burden them with my suffering. It's like everyone's suffering to a degree in life, yeah. So like, but we don't have to suffer alone. And I think that's way healthier than just kind of isolating yourself from the world.
Yeah, there's
We're all in
also
it together.
really fascinating that you stumbled into that. So there are a couple of really interesting studies that if you have someone who has a mood disorder, someone who's depressed,
Yeah.
one of the best things that you can do to improve your mental health if you are depressed is to actually help someone else. So somewhere
very
along,
sweet.
seriously, like, somewhere along the way, we started to think that people who were suffering, the way to help them is for someone from the outside to alleviate their suffering. But if you look at it statistically or scientifically, that person helping someone else has a very positive impact on their own mood. And so we don't really think about helping other people as a way to improve your own mental health. It's not because you're right, because there's the helper and there's the helpee. There's like
Yeah.
those are two things, and if you fall into one bucket, we don't think about that as being one bucket, but it kind of is. It's interesting.
No, it's fascinating, yeah, because instead it's much more of almost like an isolationist behavior where it's like, well, I'm depressed. Time to bunker away from the world, until I can figure out my shit.
Right, because you don't want to burden
Um,
someone.
well, that's the thing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds rough. How did you decide to go to therapy? What changed for
Um,
you?
it would have been trying to think like whenabouts it was, because I was in it. I was tail end of 2017. I think I'm trying to remember what exactly it was. Sorry.
It's okay. We can also talk about something else if nothing's clicking.
No, it's good. Like I don't know, because I was a lot more kind of confident, I guess, self-aware at that point, and I could tell there's some things really bothering me here, and there's just some stuff to unpack, and it's just like, it was kind of like a fuck it, I've never tried this, it could be a good shot. Um, and it was kind of just that was what kind of led me into it, and I had like a godsend of a therapist in Dublin for a while there, um, and I kind of online therapy past that as well.
What made the
Um,
therapist a godsend?
Oh, it just felt sane, because it's like, you're talking to someone in that professional environment, you can talk to them almost like a sounding board and that, and like kind of voice your mind and kind of get some insights into yourself, and they help, tease that out of you as you go along, and like you just help understand your own brain better. So instead of like torturing yourself or your brain, it's like you kind of have a better idea of how it's working and why you're thinking the way you do, and that just makes you better equipped to just understand yourself better, but just be in a better mental state ultimately.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful what you said, that you feel sane. So the
But that's
big
the thing, yeah, you do.
the,
Oh,
the
I'm not losing my mind, thank God.
yeah. So the big irony is people, when you start losing your mind, you were afraid that if you go to a therapist, you will confirm that you have lost your mind, because who goes
Yeah.
to therapists? People who are crazy.
Yeah, which is just
And
unfortunate
so
that that's the stigma. Like,
yeah, you're losing your mind. You don't want to be losing your mind.
Yeah.
Crazy people go to therapy, and the big irony is that when you go to therapy, what you discover is that you are actually sane.
Yep.
And that you've been sane all along.
Yeah, it's mad, but you wouldn't know that until you go there,
Right,
and you're resistant to go there because you don't want to admit it, and
So
it's frustrating.
It's really bizarre, but I've never heard it phrased that way, but it's beautiful. That therapy is actually where you discover how sane you are, not when you discover how crazy you are. And the big irony,
of
the
course,
really
yeah.
sad thing, is that people feel crazy, but they're actually way more sane. And that's what.
Yeah, like you just it's like mentally, like there's stuff that going on there you need to unpack. It's like going to your doctor ultimately, you just need to go to the doctor to try and work some of it out, you know?
Yeah, I like that analogy too, because I think what we're sort of seeing is, in today's world, like the level of mental stress outweighs the level of physical stress that most human beings experience.
Absolutely. We want to ease into the old existential dread again as well. There's
Yeah.
a lot going on there
Let's
to
ease in.
unpack. It's been pretty hot this last week. I don't know if you've been feeling it.
Oh, yeah, so tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, no, like, I think like the climate that we're in, and just like, there's a lot of almost existential terror there, where like you just look at the state of the world and like, oh God, everything's on fire and screaming. And it's like I'm just trying to like kind of get by my own life on top of that as well. And then all this, and it's like it's overwhelming the amount that's going on.
How do you manage that?
Best you can. Like honestly, like you have to know when to untangle yourself, I guess, from the larger world sometimes, and take the downtime for yourself. I think we're only built to kind of mentally process so much. Like disconnected from the old phone, social media. I find that helps a lot. I think we need that more than ever, because ironic that we're saying this on an interactive Twitch live stream where everyone's tuned in, but it helps. It just knowing when to kind of just tune out and just get away from it, and just like I'm gonna do something kind of common for myself.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned that we're doing this on Twitch because yeah. So I was
Yeah.
at the American Psychiatric Association conference
Mm.
and someone asked me, so it sounds like what you do is almost like hold an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in a bar. And then I said, well, actually, yeah. And people may think that that's a terrible idea, but if you really think about where should you hold AA meetings, a bar is the best place to hold an AA meeting. And and I know it sounds really bizarre, but I think that the internet has screwed up our mental health and also
Mm.
is exactly where we need to be discussing mental health. And we can use this tool for good too, right? I mean, that's
I
like
mean,
literally,
absolutely, I mean, speaking of someone with social anxiety just in front of everyone right now, like it definitely helps to kind of almost be public with stuff like this. Because I know like we're talking about like no one wants to talk about any of these issues and we're all just stuck in our own heads. Here is us talking about it, like if that can help push someone to like therapy or just like like a better mental state, like that is very valuable, having that kind of public forum.
yeah, I think very well said, Daniel. I think one of the really interesting things is that as especially mental health became one of the most private parts of medicine.
Mm.
So if you kind of think about like, cancer, like the whole world was wearing these yellow armbands at some point to
Yeah.
signal to the rest of the world that they had cancer. It was something that we advertised. There was a whole like industry, there still is, of like
Mm.
cosmetics and merch around cancer and signaling to the rest of the world that we have cancer. And then on the opposite end of that, we have mental health, where if you go to a therapist, the last thing that you ever want to do is tell anyone that you've been to a therapist. Even if
Yep.
you're better and it helped you, it has to be kept secret. And so it's really
Which is
interesting because the private nature of therapy, I think, has propagated the stigma.
yeah, like it's an odd one, yeah, because it's like because you wouldn't just hide from your family. Like I've been to the doctor, to, like that again checking my leg or something. Like it doesn't really make sense. I viewing it as a kind of like a private thing is an interesting way of putting it. Yeah. Because I mean, unfortunately, with the state of therapy for a lot of places, it's still kind of exclusive. There are barriers to entry. Like cost would be, I know, quite a significant one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like even getting on insurance plans and that is like very rare, to say the least.
Yeah.
Um, which is unfortunate, yeah, because it does just make it a bit tougher, and then it makes it harder to kind of just get mental health issues out in the open because
Yeah.
it is such a private thing.
And I think
Yeah.
it's it's private for a good reason.
Well, yeah, I
Sometimes,
mean,
sometimes
yeah,
in
that too.
conversations that are not live streamed on the internet, we discuss things that are
Yes,
understandably very private, and that's good.
yes, no, of
It,
course.
it's just I think it's an interesting double-edged sword.
It is. No, absolutely. Um, oh God, people are talking about depression merch and that in chat at the moment. I mean, there are t-shirts I see these days where it's just like, "How are you feeling today?" And it's just a cartoon character with caption, "Ah!" Like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, me too.
yeah. I
So
think
we
it's
get it in some capacity.
it's interesting. I wonder if we should have armbands merch. Um,
Just
what
screaming.
color? What color? If we had a I'm depressed, if we had a I'm in treatment or I've been in therapy before armband, like cancer survivors.
Oh
We had a
God, I mean, it's
mental
got to
health
be blue.
survivor, huh?
It's got to be blue. I'm feeling
Blue.
blue. I'm
Okay.
feeling blue. It's got to be blue.
I like
There's
your
nothing else.
green shamrock icon with the sweat on
Thank you.
top. That one's
We could
great.
have him as well. He's just very anxious.
Yeah. Anxious
Oh,
shamrock t-shirt.
summarizes it. Oh God.
Yeah. Did you want to explore more about like Irish culture? Like I feel like we sort of I'm happy to talk about existential dread. I'm happy to talk about Irish culture. I can whip out the old iPad and we can try to stitch things together and just kind of what I heard from you and maybe we can share something for
Um,
everyone. What do you think we should be doing? You
I mean, I'm
what feels
happy to dive into a bit of the old dread. That might be an interesting one to talk about because I think like there's so much to unpack with culture and that I think there. Um, but
well
I mean, it might be a nice one to go into because I know
yeah
I
so
know that my experience with it is like is probably a bit different to most.
Yeah, so tell me about what's your experience with dread?
Well, touching on some of like the lung stuff, I mean, that would be some of it, obviously. Is like I was always like a feeling of anxiety before, but now it's almost like a reassuring thing because I'm very much aware of the dread, but also I feel like I'm living life a lot more.
Okay.
So when I feel that way, it's a lot more reassuring versus just anxiety inducing all the time. I know that I'm someone like almost because of that, where it's like I find it hard to kind of switch off my brain sometimes from like, well, where's it all lead? You know, what are you doing with life and stuff like that? You know, like I still have days even now where like I'll wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. It's like I'm 28 and life is over and I've done nothing. And then it's like, no, you're fine. Sometimes I get that feeling with dread, you know, which I think that I think that would be a more common kind of feeling with it. Only get that occasionally, but for the most part, it's a weirdly almost reassuring thing because I can remind myself, it's like, stop that, you know, and it's like you've done more than you thought and things like that. It's almost like curiosity is kind of like a lead, seems to almost help a bit because it's like you just start picking it apart and then you kind of realize where it's coming from. It's not quite as anxiety inducing as it initially was. So it's like, so why am I feeling this dread? And how did this feeling come about? And you kind of like tease it out and pick it apart.
Where is it coming from?
About here, physically. Um, but I don't know. Like, I know that just from whenever I was a kid, I had it very like drilled into me from a very early age, just the concept of time and just mortality and that. Like God, like I want to talk like I would have been like I think when I was like about 10 years old, so like quite early on, and it's like kind of thinking about stuff like that. And just being aware of our mortality. Like, I know something that like kind of set it off was again grandparents passing away on my mum's side of the family. I know other things that kind of set it off would have been reading stuff like would have been reading stuff like Dubliners. I would have been reading like The Catcher in the Rye at like quite an early age and stuff like that. Very much in part that same feeling where it's like, what if everything's just not okay, you know? And it's like, what if time is limited? And it's like heavy, hard hitting concepts when you're just like fucking 10 and watching like Yu-Gi-Oh on the
Yeah.
side and shit. You
Yeah,
know,
I
like
think it's
yeah,
weird what they have us read like when we're
yeah. No,
young.
it's a lot. Like there's a lot to unpack there, you know. Um, but ever since then, it's kind of just clicked where it's like, you know, be aware of the time you're spending. And for a lot of life, like you know, I was like kind of more so restricted by that sense because I was almost anxious the entire time. Where it's like, oh God, oh God, oh God, the time is passing, the time is passing. But again, post lung, it's more so, okay, we're gonna start doing stuff with that time. And so that's where it very much changed and became way more reassuring rather than just anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Um, so again, it's weird because it's again like I mean for a long part like just existential dread and terror. It's like I think it's something that just everyone kind of. I mean, who doesn't go through it in this day and age, you know? Um, and like for a lot of the time, it's just quite restrictive. But now it's like a weirdly kind of liberating thing because trying to be self-aware about it, I know how to like almost process it and deal with it. Is how it kind of feels.
How is existential dread liberating for you?
Um, I'm trying to find the right way to say it. Like, it's hard to express, but it's almost like a laugh at it kind of sense in life because like I'm kind of aware of like my age and kind of mortality and stuff like that, and like kind of spending time. It's like it makes me appreciate the good things happening in my life. And also, when there is something bad kind of going on, it kind of helps me put it in the larger sum where maybe it's not as bad as it seems initially, is maybe a good way to phrase it. It's not strictly the dread that's doing that, but it's the dread that's kind of leading to some of that change and just more mental well-being, I would argue.
This is great. I'm So what would you when you said let's talk about the existential dread? What part of it? What would you like me to? You want me to just kind of keep going, or is there something in particular you wanted to share,
Um,
or you wanted to focus on?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I'm happy for to keep going a bit. Like it's hard to express, unfortunately.
So let me hear.
Um,
Let me share with you what I've heard so far.
sure.
So you still have existential dread,
Yes.
but your relationship. So, what do you mean by existential dread? Let's actually start there. What is existential dread?
Uh, Life is short, time is fleeting. We have a limited time on this planet, and we should make the most of it.
Okay.
That's kind of like the yeah. So I kind of almost like a personal, just what are you doing with your time kind of dread.
Okay. And there are times where that dread feels dreadful,
Yes.
and there are times where that dread feels liberating.
Yes, there is. Like sometimes it can be oddly helpful. Like, I don't know.
And well, let's talk about the dreadful dread for
Okay.
a second, and we will explain to everyone else how to get to the liberating dread. Okay, we will teach all that. It's great. So you say, I'm 28. You wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night because you slept on your left side.
Yes. It's like, damn it, I forgot to check out the lung again.
And then you're 28 and you've done nothing.
Done nothing.
Tell me
Washed
about
up.
that.
Oh, it's just like, it's a cold sweat. It's blind panic. It's just like, oh my, like the Home Alone like face from Kevin where it's like, ah. It's just panic. And I don't know, it just hits you sometimes, you know? It's the kind of thing that comes in a wave, and it's just like, you almost need a bit of... Sorry.
Where does it come from?
I wish I knew. Like, sometimes, yeah, because, like, sometimes it just hits you. You know, it's like, you don't really plan on it, but it's like something gets you thinking about life or the larger picture, and it's like, I think there's almost like, there's some self-doubt that probably where it comes from. It seems most plausible, I would say.
Okay.
You know, because I would like to think that I'm pretty confident in what I'm doing and life and that. But then sometimes it'll just hit me if it's like, but what if you didn't make the most of it? What if you didn't do your best? Sometimes it'll hit me like, say, maybe even after a stream or something like that, where it's just like, that could have been better. And, you know, and I like, you know, and I feel like for the crowd that's here, it's like I've kind of let them down. I know some of that will be mixed up with social anxiety as well. We have a nice little cocktail going on here of like several things. But like sometimes there'll just be like a dread there because it's like, oh, I feel like I didn't do my best that stream and I feel like that was a waste. And that could have been better. And I feel like it was just like, you know, I've wasted that evening. But more often than not, it's not as bad as I thought it was. There's like a lot of streams where like I'll have them where I'll go through and it's like, that could have been better. And then my editor Chloe will send me on the edited stream, and it's fucking hilarious. And it's like, where did this come from? You know, did you like, where did you find this? And like sometimes I just self-doubt. I think is where it comes from.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. When was the first time that you can remember that? Like, how long have you been feeling existential dread? That you're not making the most of your life? That
it would be about 10 or 11.
And what happened when you were 10 or 11?
I can't remember anything in particular. I'm trying to pick it apart myself. I've not looked at this myself in a while. I think it would be related to school more than anything is where I would probably pick it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always knew that like for school and that and like kind of like I was always good at school, you know. I like buckled down, do my homework, study and that, you know. I got like good grades and that, you know. Like there's no trouble with my parents there or anything. But I think some of the earliest ones would be like, what if there's more to life than just getting good grades, you know? Which I like for child me, like that was kind of like a big thing. It's like, what do you mean there's more than just doing well at maths? But like that kind of manifested itself then more so in secondary school, because I was still kind of struggling that train. But I remember there was one thing I did that really helped me kind of veer away from it a bit again. Throughout secondary school or high school, I was actually studying to be an engineer. And all up until my final year, I picked all of my subjects in relation to engineering, like design and communication, graphics, applied maths. I did everything in relation to that. And then I realized I actually don't want to do this forever. And I jumped ship to English because I just knew that like I really like reading books. And I don't know if there's anything from this, but I know I'm more passionate for this. So I'm not going to do it. My parents were like, I remember like they were kind of like shocked and confused by it because I'd spent like, 5 years at that point just preparing for this. And my final year, it's like I'm jumping ship. It would have been like about 6 months before I had my final exams.
And did you
So it was
jump
like
ship out of existential dread?
not out of dread. It was kind of more so, well, it's like passion mostly. Passion, because I could tell it's like my heart's not in this and I don't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. It's like I don't think I'm going to enjoy doing this forever. But part of that was kind of came about from the dread of realizing, oh God, I
Yeah.
might be doing this my
So
entire
hold on a
life.
second.
Yeah,
So I think we got to go before secondary school,
sure.
because what you're describing to me is a manifestation of the dread in
Okay.
secondary school. Does that make sense? It was already
Yes.
there,
Yes. No, it's already there. Yeah.
right? So the dread was telling you, hey, you're about to make a mistake, bro.
Oh, just a scary
So
concept.
here's the
Yeah.
thing. Is there more to life? Is that a question that you had?
I mean, back then, yes.
So I'm going to go out on a
Absolutely.
limb. I think you had an answer.
I
think
think
the
I had an
dread.
answer even
Oh,
back
yeah.
then.
Oh, yeah. When you were 10 or 11, you had an answer because you were good
I
at
mean,
grades, right?
I,
You're
I
good at school.
yeah.
Is there more to life
I
than
did pretty
grades
okay.
when you're 10?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
What else is there?
There's travel, there's art, there's
Not when you're
people,
10.
Not when you're 10.
What was there when you're
There's
10 besides grades?
there's video games.
Sure.
There's friends.
Yeah.
Very local sense. There's movies, there's having fun.
Yeah, and you were doing
Yeah.
all of those things, right?
I mean, I was doing them when I was a kid too, yeah.
What were you not doing when you were 10 or 11?
See, it's weird because it still felt like I wasn't really living, which is quite dramatic for, 10-year-old me to kind of proclaim.
Yes.
It's like, I don't,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
I haven't experienced this world. Oh, woe is me. It's like,
Nope.
dude, go watch Scooby-Doo.
Don't devalue the way that you felt. You see what you're doing there? This
Thank
is
you.
why you don't know where it
Yes.
comes from, because anytime you get close to where it comes from, what do? You say it's silly to
Devalue
feel
it,
that
yeah.
way. So you're shutting off conversation with yourself when you do that.
Yes. No, I can see that. Yeah.
Right?
I'm like, just kind of saying, it's like, I'm just being dramatic and silly in that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but 10-year-old you, what were they missing? Because life was passing you by. What was passing you by?
Just more of a sense of purpose than grades.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
because
yeah.
it's just, sorry.
Let me try to. So I'm curious. I'm struggling between asking you an open-ended question and just kind of going with my hypothesis.
Okay.
So like when you were 10,
Yes.
I'm guessing that like on a week-to-week basis, there were some things that you did that were fun. You had a couple friends. You were good at
Had
your
a couple
grades.
friends.
You
Video
played
games.
video games. But then there was like stuff that was happening that you were not doing. What was happening when you were 10? Do you remember? Were there any times in your life where you felt like there's
No,
something happening in life that I want to live and I can't?
So I actually do think I know what part of it is, and I haven't actually thought about this in a long time. A lot of my friends were involved in clubs and stuff like that back in the day when I was 10, and they would do all these extra things outside of school that I simply was not involved in. Because I had my friends, I had video games, but that was it for the most part. Like books as well. But like I would always see people going in clubs and going on these like kind of wild adventures, like Gaeltachts, like the Irish language schools that we'd have. And I wouldn't do any of that. It would just be school games, school games, friends. Bit of the spice it up there. But that was some of it. That would have been some of it. It's like God, like all these people around me. It feels like they're doing more.
And how did it feel to be doing less?
Pretty bad, pretty bad, pretty anxious inducing. It's like, God, I should be doing more with my time. Is kind of how it felt, you know. But I was still also struggling to do that, for quite some time, you know. Like I again, like in secondary school, I would have came out into my own a bit more. It wouldn't have been until college that I really got there, I would say.
Yeah.
So it was a long time.
Not only were you missing out on life,
Mm.
but you probably why were you not involved in clubs? Why weren't you doing what they were doing?
It's just kind of scared. That's it. Yeah. I mean, I think because I didn't really
So
think about social anxiety or anything back then, or even the concept of me having anxiety was unknown to me at that point. And me being kind of closed off and reserved, like, I couldn't be open with anyone about that. Like less of all my parents. Um, yeah, like it just kind of felt like it sucked a bit. It just felt like life was passing me by, and that's actually probably where it comes from. God, I haven't thought about that in a long time.
we're
Oh,
just
my therapist is gonna have a field day after this.
Daniel, we're just getting started, bro.
Oh
So
God, I'll pass on the notes to him.
so now the next question becomes, what's it like to inhabit someone in the game of life who can't play it?
It's like, how does it feel to be an NPC?
Yeah, right? Like there's all this
It's
like
not
and
great.
who's responsible for not being a part of the club? Why aren't you part of the club?
Again, I was just socially anxious. I was kind of scared. There
Yeah,
was no
so
reason. And I did actually try even at one point, and I remember trying. I joined a sailing club when I was about 10. Like we live in like a coastal town, and I was out in a boat for a few weeks, and I stopped because I just got really anxious and scared being around people at that time. I just like completely dipped out of it again, and that kind of led into it too. It's like, oh God, now I tried the club, but I couldn't do the club well enough. And so that kind of fed into it too, thinking about it.
yeah, so if you're someone who life is there to be lived,
Yeah.
but you're not capable of living it.
It's how it felt,
Yeah.
when I was a kid. And it was pretty tough going. And it's like, I think like the media that I had would have kind of helped me be a bit more aware of it, but also kind of it still felt powerless to do something about it. Like again, reading Dubliners, reading Catcher in the Rye, like Catcher in the Rye hugely is like that whole idea of paralysis and feeling like you just can't do what you need to do. Going through that, Holden touches on it so much of the time, like what he needs, and he identifies what would be good for him, but he just can't do it, because like he's just struggling.
And what do you think happens to someone who is living life and is paralyzed to be able to take advantage of it? Who can't live it because
It
they're
feels like
powerless.
it feels like it just passed you by,
Yeah.
and that's anxiety inducing,
And what do you
because
think
it's just
they think about their existence? What does
eh,
existence hold for them?
it's anxiety, like more than anything, I would say, yeah. It's like you just look at it as like, oh God, like what am I doing? When everyone else is off on their own adventures and stories,
Yep.
and you wouldn't be too kind to yourself, more than anything, because you'd be comparing yourself to others a lot, you know?
Yeah, I think that they would dread their existence,
Yeah.
you know.
Existential dread, yeah. Yeah, that's
Right?
probably where
Like
some of it comes from, like, no, I haven't thought about that in a very long time. It's mad.
so how do you understand the specificity of your memories from the age of 10? Why does your mind remember that you went to sailing club for like 4 weeks and then dipped out?
I think somewhere it's held on to that. Like I've not thought about this in a number of years.
Yeah.
And it's probably just because there's a bit of trauma associated with it, if I had to guess. It's because I mean, the trauma not so much from the club directly itself, but the experience in the club of me trying to connect and be there. It's like, yes, I'm going to have my own story too, but then being an anxious wreck about it and it just not working out, and the dread of that not working out.
Absolutely. Right?
And
So like here's the thing.
let's go.
When you can't rely on yourself,
Hmm.
then existence becomes dread. Because like all of these things could like 28 years old, you wake up in a cold sweat, life is passing you by. Why is life passing you by? Because you're fucking afraid that you can't actually live it. Because in the
Yeah.
past you tried to live it and you weren't able to live it. So existence is not a joy. It becomes terrible, terrifying. Like,
Hmm.
how do I
I mean, yeah, I mean, just to say there, at 28, much better equipped for processing all of that mental baggage and emotional baggage too, of course. You know, as I wake up in the cold sweat, but I'll go back to sleep. You know,
100%. So this is
Yeah.
that's a really good point, right? So the other thing that we're going to notice is that there's fluctuation of this
Yep.
part of you, and that when you were 28, you're fine. You have survived death, Daniel.
Yes,
Literally.
I did it.
Right?
We made it out of the sailing club.
But the problem is when you wake up in a cold sweat, you're not 28. The 28-year-old you is
Yeah.
the one who talks to yourself. How old are you when you wake up in a cold sweat? And oh my God.
Oh, you're a kid again. Yeah, it's like waking up. It's like, oh God, there's an exam tomorrow. It's like, wait, I've been out of school for 10 years. You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
So this is really important to understand. Okay, do you have any? Actually, I want to think for a second and try to tie this together. But any thoughts, questions, anything else you want to say? I've been interrupting you a little bit, so anything
no,
that
you're good. You're all good. Honestly, it's fascinating to just kind of unpack some of this and like, yeah, I've never really thought about things in relation to when I was 10 and that. Like, I've not looked back on that time in a long while. Especially for things like dread and that. Like the furthest I ever go back would be, I mean, just being aware and like even some of the books I was reading and that, which like, you know, presenting a lot of heavy concepts and that, you know. It's just kind of fascinating because like I even forgot about the sailing club and shit like that. You know, I haven't thought about that in a long
how old
time.
were you when you read Catcher in the Rye?
Been 11 or 12.
So here's the thing: you weren't presented those concepts at 11 or 12. They already existed within you, and
Yeah.
that book resonated with you.
Yeah,
my
I mean,
guess.
and that's what it is. Yeah, and it kind of like helped me understand it a bit more, which is my own awareness there.
Yeah, and also in a terrifying way because you saw a story about a kid who was you, and you saw that kid get fucked right, left, and center because they could not develop, they couldn't control their own destiny. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh shit. But at the age
Yeah.
of 10, you're not aware of this, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh God, I'm holding.
Right? And so it's really fascinating because from a timeline perspective, it's like textbook, dude. 10
Yeah.
to 11, development of existential dread. Right?
I mean,
11
you
to
just
12,
throw in
Catcher
some-
in the Rye.
Yeah.
2000
Throwing some adolescence into the mix there too, you know.
Yeah,
of
so
course.
then some amount of reinforcement, some amount of growth, actually switching to English, I think was a good move actually for you. You felt a lot, I think you talk about it because you felt a lot of existential dread, but that's actually you taking control of your life because you're a little bit older, right? You're in secondary school.
Yeah.
So you're not controlled by like the 10-year-old terrified kid who is like watching life pass them by and has tried to live it. That's the really damaging thing. Is you, even when you were 10 or 11, you're like, fuck this. I'm not going to be that way. And then you get 4 weeks of sailing club and then you wash out.
Oh, Jesus. I'm just picturing like 10-year-old, like a little chubby me. And it's just like, oh God.
Or are you chubby?
Oh no, like I weigh as much now as I did when I was 10.
So that,
Like I just stretched out as time went on. Yeah.
right? So that's a conversation for your therapist, but I would dig into, because even when it's fascinating, right? Because when do you mention you're chubby? Now is
Sorry?
this point in the conversation. Like now is when you think about 10-year-old chubby failure you, right?
Just thinking about kid me and that, yeah. It's
Right.
a bit nervous, a bit scared.
Yeah, more than a bit. That's your old Irish resilience.
It is, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't help it. Like
Yeah,
honestly,
it's okay.
Like,
You don't-
I fall back into it.
I know. I don't think you should change that. I'm pointing it out, right? So that's we can translate your Irish
Yeah.
speak, and it doesn't need to change because we both know what it
Translating
is.
from Irish and this is I'm speaking English.
Yeah, right. So,
We just can't understand them. Like,
no, but I mean, literally, the translation is when someone is smiling, what they're really doing is crying. And that's how we translate Irish. And if they say a
Oh,
little bit,
God.
what they mean is a lot.
yes, no,
Right?
that's fair.
That's how you translate Irish.
Oh God.
And I think let me see if I got this one right. It's all grand. Is that what y'all say? Is that
It's all grand, yeah.
it's all
It'll
grand
be
means
grand.
it's all shite.
Yeah, it's like we're just trying to process it and say it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
right? And
It'll be grand.
if we say, if we want to translate, it's all fine. What that means is, oh God, I'm terrified about the future, but I don't know how to
Yes.
change it. So I hope it'll be fine. Please, God, let it be fine.
Yeah, so it's just a bit shorthand to say it's fine.
Right. We can translate Irish into English, right?
It's just a bit easier in passing conversation.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Oh God.
How are you doing, Daniel?
I'm great. I'm laughing and smiling a lot right now.
Yeah.
You can translate that from Irish. Oh God, no, but it's fascinating. Yeah, no, this. I mean, like, again, I mean, Irish perspective, you learn to laugh at yourself, you know, and like this is even part of that, where like I can just kind of plain see it as day. It's like, God, that makes sense. And in retrospect, like just being where I am now, it's just like, God, that's funny, you know. And I mean, that's just me processing it.
100%, man. Questions? Otherwise, I'm going to think.
Oh, have a good think if you want.
Yeah.
I've just been catching some bits from chat as we've been going. They had a great acronym for what an NPC was, which was, I think, not part of the club, which is fucking great.
That's
I love it. Oh no, you all right?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Oh God.
Chat is brilliant.
Yeah. God almighty. No, but it's fascinating because I've not thought about some of that. And like definitely whenever I go back to see like my therapist, like I'm gonna actually have to address some of that. There's a lot of the conversation will be like more sticking points about the old lung and that, you know? Kind of like the mental change there. I never thought about that when I was like 10 and that because I just never thought it was important. You know?
Yeah.
I knew I could tell like things where it's like something doesn't feel quite right. And you know, and the timeline just kind of makes sense too with Catcher in the Rye and shit like that, you know, just resonating with it.
Yeah, I think the tricky thing is when we're trying to dig into, our psychology. There's certainly like a, so the perspective that I shared with you is more from yoga than psychotherapy or psychiatry. It's more about understanding how our mind learns. So it's not even about pathology or anxiety or anything like that. It's just what is the process of learning. And then what happens is once you have a seed of something, then you have subsequent experiences that will resonate with the seed and cause it to grow into a tree. So Catcher in the Rye was like giving fertilizer. Some of this other stuff like was like watering that plant. And then there are like certain times in your life where the pneumothorax, for example, was like chopping down half the tree. And so it's so you'll, and what you kind of see is that just the way that our mind functions. So what the yogis sort of discovered is that we think of our mind and our identity as static, but it's not static. Everything in the mind is literally a fluctuation. So a thought comes and goes, an emotion comes and goes, even states of consciousness will come and go. So these are things that they called vrittis. So they sort of realize nothing is permanent in the mind. Huh?
Sorry, could you just pronounce that word again? Because it's just very pleasant sounding.
Vritti.
Vritti. That's just lovely. Carry on.
So these are vrittis or vruttis. But
Vritti.
And so everything is just fluctuations in the mind. And once you understand that, okay, like, so your resonance with Catcher in the Rye, there had to be something to resonate with.
Yes.
Right? And so that's kind of what happens with a vritti is that once we have a fluctuation in the mind, depending on what we encounter in life, that vritti will shrink or grow. So if I tell you that I love you, you will feel a tiny bit of love. And if I tell you I love you again, you will feel a greater amount of love. That vritti will grow in your mind. And then if you tell me that you've failed or did something bad or whatever, and I tell you I love you then the vritti will grow a lot. Does that make sense? Right? So if you don't feel lovable and I tell you I love you anyway, that will create a very powerful sense of love inside you. This is why it's so damaging when like you have like toxic people in your life and you come to them with pride. You're like, hey, I did something. And if they're like, screw you, you're worthless, it's not good enough. That's why it's so damaging.
Yeah,
Same principle. Right?
Yeah, you never want to be open again.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I wanted to think. So I guess I'll just keep going. So let me know if you want me to draw this out. But let's talk about anxiety.
Sure.
So when you're So there's this whole existential dread crap, which maybe I'll circle back to, but
Sure.
let's understand a couple things. So when you're anxious,
Yes.
there are lots of possibilities. And what are you trying to do when you're anxious?
I am trying to map out those possibilities so that like I'm mentally prepared.
Absolutely, right? So anxiety is about optimization. Literally, that's what the function in our mind of anxiety is designed to do. So what anxiety does is it projects a lot of scenarios, and then if we can think about a lot of scenarios, we can pick the best one. And the more that if we don't know what the best one is, right? Because when you're anxious, it's like hard to pick something. So then what does your mind do? It just keeps on generating more possibilities, working through it over and over again. You start to loop. It's kind of unproductive, right?
Yeah, and you just burn yourself out with what's potential.
Absolutely.
Possible.
So optimization is the goal, and you're looking for perfect. If you can find a perfect solution, are you going to be anxious?
Like, I mean, mentally, you'd be like, no, I won't be anxious again, but you're probably still going to be anxious because you worked yourself up into such a stupor, you know?
Yeah, so I think that you're precisely. So theoretically, hypothetically, you will no longer be anxious if you have a perfect solution, but practically, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Because you've worked yourself into a stupor, and also because perfect is not a thing, right? Like in reality.
Absolutely.
Except for your smile.
Oh,
Okay.
too sweet.
So
You just told me you love me as well just a moment ago, you know? So I was coming on strong now.
So now something interesting. So when you had the pneumothorax, what I would venture is that optimization became impossible. You realize that, oh shit, there's no way to fix this. Like, I'm going to die. Because if you sort of think about it, death doesn't really factor into that, right? When we're trying to optimize something, we're not like, well, fuck, everything's going to, like, it's going to end at some point. Like, so if you sort of think about it, death makes perfection of life impossible.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, like,
that makes sense, yeah, because it's like you can't plan around
right,
that,
so
you know?
like, especially like you're supposed to be in the hospital and you're sitting there like in some club in your uni or whatever, right? And it's like, well, like, wow, I could just like die tomorrow, and then like, what's the use of optimizing all this crap if it's like if I'm gonna die?
I'm just dead, yeah.
So this is what's really bizarre, is anxiety is the search for optimization and the search for perfection. Okay. And sometimes, and this happens, something like cancer or a spontaneous pneumothorax will shatter the possibility of optimization or perfection. And if you can shatter the possibility of perfection, like perfection is just off the table, optimization is off the table, then what it does is shatters the anxiety with it. Because if anxiety is trying to do something that is impossible, and there's like, we're done. We might as well just do something. Because it's not like I can pick the perfect choice anyway. And so I see this a lot where people will sort of say like, okay, like I almost died and it's the best thing that happened to me. People have told me that about cancer. People have told me that about bipolar disorder. I'm like, what are y'all talking about? But what happens when we start to do that is it sort of shatters some of these preconceptions. And now that perfection is off the table, now you're kind of free of anxiety, right? Because it's like, well, might as well just do it. Because it's not like I can do it perfectly anyway. And even if I develop the perfect plan, everything could be taken away from me at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
So this is the second thing that a kind of near-death experience does for anxiety, is that anxiety is about planning. It's about the future. It's about, I got to think about step 14, and if I can figure out step 14, then I can figure out 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But if you're playing a game and like the internet can go out at any minute, like you're not playing the long game anymore. Like if you can short circuit the dimension of time, then anxiety gets way better. Right? So like now you've realized that like there's no point in planning for the future because I could die in any moment. So might as well do something right now. It's the second thing to understand about anxiety. This is also why if we look at evidence-based treatments for anxiety, things like mindfulness, how does mindfulness help anxiety? It brings us to the present. Anxiety is when our mind is in the future. So when you're in the present, it's hard to have anxiety, okay? Point number
just
2.
Better for like mental well-being, like.
So here's the other cool thing that you've stumbled upon. So you've said that there's a lot of bad stuff that is actually good in a weird way. Like, you speak in a lot of contradictions, right? You're like,
Yes.
honestly, having a spontaneous pneumothorax, I can't sleep on my left. I can't exercise with my left arm. And yet this is one of the best things in my life. And everyone's
Yeah.
you know, there are going to be people who are listening to this who are actually going to be coveting this. And I coveted this kind of stuff too. When I was kind of like screwed up in life, I'd heard these stories of people like you that almost died. And they were like tested, right? They're like, either you're going to be shattered or you're going to be a Chad. And I longed for those transformative experiences where I was tired of being like watching life pass me by. And I would take being completely shattered and broken, and then at least it's over. Or be tested and be found to be strong enough, and then I become a different human being. And just like you, everything in my life becomes easier. I've conquered anxiety because I've conquered death. Like, I had these kinds of ideas where I was chasing things like what you were kind of, you know, what happened to you.
Gotcha, right.
But one thing that's kind of interesting is that when you kind of like had this pneumothorax thing, I think one thing that's really interesting is that good and bad, you transcended good and bad. So there's this concept in the East called Advaita Vedanta, which is non-dualism. And I threw a bunch of stuff at you. But basically, like, when we think about, almost, you know, having a spontaneous pneumothorax is objectively bad, right?
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, absolutely, would not recommend.
And do you think that your life is better because you had that spontaneous pneumothorax?
Not specifically because of the spontaneous pneumothorax, but what came after that. The mental product of that, it is better for that.
Right. So like,
if I go back, I could do without a collapsed lung.
Sure. Right.
But it's all got a bit mixed up.
And so let me ask you a question. If I could wave a magic wand and go back in time and take that experience away from you, would you want me to do it?
Fuck. I don't know if I would just say, like, that's the thing. Because if that was the case, then all the mental good that kind of came from it may not necessarily happen. Now, I imagine it could by a different means, but that is the one that it was for me. So I don't know.
Okay.
I genuinely don't know.
So that's the right answer.
Okay.
And here's why. So I'm kind of asking you, is it better or worse if it didn't happen? And you're saying, I don't know. And the answer is that because it can't be better or worse. It's neither better nor worse. It's just, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So I know it sounds kind of weird, but the experience is neither good nor bad. It is both good and bad.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other problem with anxiety. Anxiety requires a judgmental approach. So a core part of anxiety is that some things are good and some things are bad. Right? Because that's what you're optimizing requires.
Yeah, because you're trying to
things
optimize
to
it
be
and
bucketed.
map those out.
So you cannot be anxious about anything that is not good or bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like the fact that I'm using a clear glass as opposed to a non-clear glass when I drink my water, is that good or bad for you?
It doesn't matter.
Are you anxious about this?
No.
Right?
Be a bit worried if I was,
Right? Exactly. Right? So but what do you get anxious about? You get anxious about bad things. So judgment and the separation of things in this world into good and bad is a requirement for anxiety.
Okay.
So I think one of the coolest things that happened with you is this near-death experience taught you taught you all kinds of lessons. But maybe it wasn't near-death. But one of the key things that it did is it changed your view on good and bad. And that allows you to fuck it. Because if things are like neither good nor bad, or there's going to be some pros and some cons, everything is going to be good and bad. Then you're freed from anxiety because it's like, might as well just do it.
Like, you gotta just do it, and then you will figure out if that was good or bad as by process more than anything, you know?
And here's the crazy thing. Anything that you've done, is it good or bad? Like, so just pick something that you did, that you were like, screw it, I'm just going to do it.
I like, Just pick anything?
Yeah,
Like,
just pick
sorry.
something. The last time you just like you're like you showed up on stream today, right?
I think that's a good thing.
Right? But I mean, it
Yeah.
could have been bad.
It couldn't have been bad. I was pretty confident of that going in. You're lovely, you know?
So maybe the wrong example. Kind of the point that I'm shooting for is that as you start to just do it, things are not like good nor bad. Like there's good stuff and bad stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Everything, like there's going to be some stuff I'm sure your anxiety will be like, oh, I should have done this, you know? Or maybe I could have talked more about this. Or maybe, I mean, who knows? It sounds like you're actually pretty good about that kind of stuff, so you probably won't do that. But, and this is the third really interesting thing is that I think you had an experience that really shaped or changed the way that you saw things as good or bad, because it's kind of weird. Like this, you know,
It is a mixed one, yeah. I reckon that's me even talking about dreading that, where it's like a weird liberating thing, and it's like, well, what are you talking about, you know?
Right.
Edging towards that, yeah.
And then I kind of ask you, is it a good thing? And you're like, well, right. So it's liberating and it's bad at the same time.
Yeah.
And so the more that you see things as mixed, the less anxiety that you're going to have, because if there aren't judgments between good and bad, there's no way to optimize. If there's no way to optimize, you might as well just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And then just doing things, I mean, you still hope you do a good thing, obviously, you know, or...
So there's a lot of fundamentals to anxiety that I think your story, like you beautifully illustrate, right? So the first is this kind of dimension. The first is that anxiety is about optimization.
Yeah.
And once you have an experience that sort of teaches you that, like, optimizing, like, for some fucking perfect end game is just like an impossible way to live life. Like life is gonna...
It's not gonna work.
Yeah, you know, like life is what happens when you've got, what is it, the best laid plans? Life is what happens when ruins your plans, or some saying about that, right?
Yeah, it's when you don't have plans or something like that. I can't remember
life gets in the way when you've got good plans or something. I don't know. So that's a really important thing. So now optimization is off the table. The second thing is the dimension of time, and sort of recognizing that time is very limited. And this is what's really interesting. If you go back and you listen to your talk, time is limited, is dread inducing and dread liberating. Like, oh my God, there's only a limited amount of time, so I have to make the right choice, because if I don't have the right choice, I will be filled with regret. And at the same time, time is limited. Who knows how long we're going to be on this earth? So I might as well pick something.
I'll pick something. And then also just the retrospective way would just be, it's like, I feel like I made good use of my time there, and that's almost reassuring and just good for the brain too.
Absolutely.
You know?
But if you look in the mind of an anxious person, the problem is that they think that since time is limited, I have to make the right choice. They think that their anxiety is tied to the fact that that time is limited. But what they don't realize is that your attitude towards how limited time is can push you in two opposite directions. One is paralysis and one is sudden complete action. Time is limited in either case, but for some of us, it cripples us. And for some of us, it's like, fuck it, I might as well act today.
Let's go, just be a man of action at that point,
And that's the problem with being anxious, is people think that their anxiety is determined by the fact that time is limited. But it's their attitude towards that actually results in the anxiety. It's actually in your control, which is what a lot of people don't get. They think it's the other way around. They feel controlled by the fact that they don't have infinite time, and they can't play every game on the universe, and they can't watch every movie in existence, and they can't do everything, right? Time is limited. Oh my God. It's your attitude towards it that actually creates anxiety. And this is what's super cool, is that when it comes to anxiety, now we're going to kind of come full circle. This is the way that I am. This is the way that I'm wired. No. This is the way that you have been wired up until this point. But you've shown us that drastic change is possible. And if you dig into fucking the sources of your existential dread, which still cause you to wake up at the age of 28 in a cold sweat, and you heal that, you will change. If you start to really lean into, you've already figured this stuff out. But if you lean into this idea that anxiety is born of optimization, and optimization requires judgment, requires the demarcation between good and bad. And as you start to live in more Advait life, Advait means non-dual, that there is neither good nor bad, which you're already doing, your anxiety will get even better. Right? And this
that's good. I mean, that sounds good. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's just handling anxiety better,
Not
Um,
handling. No.
well, I'm phrasing.
Yeah, no, and
But like,
that's why I'm so this is important. So this is like what's
yeah.
really cool is the yogis believe that anxiety can be conquered, not
Okay.
handled. So I
Conquer.
do think that it is good to handle anxiety, but I also have found something really interesting when I work with patients, which is that if you look at things like the placebo effect, if I have a patient and we both believe that the best that they can do is cope, I sometimes wonder if I'm doing my patients a disservice by not opening the possibility in their mind of a more complete healing.
Okay, no, yeah, that makes sense actually. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you got
But
to do the opposite where you got to moderate
yeah, yeah.
expectations and you got to say, hey, this is what the
Well,
evidence
no, of
base is.
course, because like I mean, even with anxiety and that, like I'm very much aware. I've got it for life, as is anxiety.
Yep. So I think,
Um, but so I think that's why I just keep saying things like handle on that. But even like the positive mental attitude of saying things like conquer and that, like there is more reassuring because you're doing way more than handling there at that point,
yeah.
Um,
And so what I would kind of say is when I work with people, what I've sort of settled on is, okay, this is what the science tells us is likely. And I'm going to hope for more.
yeah,
Right? So we're going to teach you coping
yeah.
mechanisms. We're going to teach you how to cope. You're going to get your oxygen mask that has copium in it, And
Get
also
you on
like,
life support, but then also off it eventually.
yeah, cuz coping gets exhausting after a while, and we really
Yeah.
should shoot for like change. And I'm hopeful for that for you because you've already come so far. Like it's amazing, dude.
I mean, thank you. You're too kind. I mean, I just know that like, I compared to where I was, like I know like my mental habits have gotten a lot better. I know mindfulness is just a huge thing. Even just exercise and trying to exercise on the regular helps a lot. Just because again, you're thrown into the present moment with stuff like that. Can't really concentrate on anything else. It kind of just settles your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering if like what would be like the most practical recommendation or like that you could give for like chat or something for like kind of almost managing anxiety or like initial steps. Like we had talked about mindfulness and stuff like that. Is there like a particular like resource or thing that you could point people towards? Or, like a book even.
Yeah, so I mean,
I'm wondering.
we built a guide to anxiety, which
Oh yeah, no, I know in the
so
program actually.
yeah,
Yeah, of
yeah.
course. Yeah,
I mean, that's why we built it because people
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
have these kinds of
That makes sense.
conversations where we'll illustrate concepts, and yeah. So like we have an anxiety guide which someone just messaged me about and was they had a very good experience with. But so
That's
I
good.
think it works really well. There's a bunch of meditation techniques in there. We also will optimize all kinds of other stuff. Like we'll talk about diet and even like gut health and things like that. There's all kinds of like fascinating like scientific interventions. We'll
Yeah, yeah.
also explain things from a clinical perspective. So that's our resource. So the resources that we
That
build are
makes
the
sense.
ones that, if people want like, 15 hours of stuff on anxiety that kind of walks you through start to finish, that's what I would recommend. In your case, I think you need to get physiotherapy.
Yeah, that's fair. My doctor said the same thing.
Right. And because
I just need to do it. Yeah,
yeah,
no excuse.
I mean, it's okay to have
Would
an
enjoy.
excuse, but I think
Nah,
it sounds
I
like,
don't. Like, I'm just honest with myself there. It's like, yeah, I just got to do that at some point.
yeah. When do you think that point's going to be?
Soon. It needs to be soon.
Yeah, good.
I need to start looking at it that way rather than just even putting it off because I think that's even part of it. I'm like, oh, I'll do it later. Like, no, I need to just call tomorrow or some shit, like get the ball rolling as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, and so I invite everyone who's watching to take their inspiration from you. And you're saying, what are their resources?
Right.
Sure, you guys check out Dr. K's Guide to Anxiety. It really is great. But also, like, I think there's things that we all think about doing that we don't actually do, and then there's no like resource for that. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, that's
and
fair.
so I would say like by all means check out the resource, but also you got to be super careful. The resources will help you, but
Yeah.
they won't ever do the work for you.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Yeah, probably a bit naive for me to
No,
say.
no,
It's
no.
like,
I thought
hey,
it was.
what book could we read to fix it?
No, 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 no,
Like,
no, no, no. I didn't interpret it that way. I really
okay,
do think it's good. I mean, I think it's arguably the most helpful question that has been asked over the last 2 hours.
Okay.
And at the same time, I think sometimes, especially if we're talking to anxious people, right? They're like, okay, if I get 15 resources and I optimize it, at some point,
Cured. Yeah,
I won't have to overcome that hump.
yeah.
So we can help you get 99% of the way there, but it's that last 1% that you got to jump, right? You got to overcome it yourself. So take inspiration from you.
Therapy session. No, but it's good though. It's good stuff, honestly.
Yeah. Any last thoughts or questions before we wrap up for the day?
Honestly, just thanks very much for having me and just, having a chat and that. Like, it's just, it's genuinely nice. Like, and just like even talking mental health in a public space, like I just love the concept of that. And I know you've done a lot of advocacy work there, of course, like kind of through the streams and that. So just, thank you very much because it is very important.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you, because we can't do this work alone. Like this work requires you. Really, I mean, I think the reason we're here is not actually because of. I mean, like I'm a part of it, right? So maybe 50% at tops, but the reason we're here is because people come on and like share their stories, and so seriously, like, thank you. I have
no problem at all.
I have one last thing that I wanted to say, which I thought was kind of interesting. So because we were talking about male mental health. So, one thing that's really interesting about male mental health, and you were talking a lot about vulnerability and talking.
Yeah.
So I think that stuff is really important. And like, I am a psychiatrist. I have conversations with people. Talking is great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at emotional healing, one of the really interesting things is that our system of emotional healing is based on talking. And that system of emotional healing, we assume that what we need to do is talk, right? But the whole point is that it's hard for men to talk.
Yes.
And so then what we say is you as a man need to learn how to talk. Right?
Yeah.
So there's an interesting thing. So if you really look at research, what we kind of discover is a couple of very interesting things about emotional healing in men. The first is that the majority of, I think, Freud's patients, I think, were women.
Yes.
2/3 of therapists are women. 2/3 of people in therapy are women. A lot of our studies are done on equal numbers of gender ratios, so we usually control for that kind of thing. But if you look at how did we design the study in the first place, it is predominantly psychotherapy done on women. So that's just the majority of what clients have been. And so there's one really interesting thing. If you look at studies on couples counseling, men are more reluctant to engage in couples counseling. And if you ask them why, they feel like they are at a disadvantage because we're talking about heteronormative relationships. So women and their therapists are more versed in emotional vocabulary, whereas men have difficulty with it. So there's
because even saying, like, going into it, that, like, men are saying, right, at disadvantage, even, like, the language of it there. It's like, it's almost like hostility and resistant to it.
Right. And so there's something, I saw something really weird recently. I was witness to something called an anger ceremony. So a bunch of dudes went out into the woods and they like got into a circle and then they each went off, like, let's say a kilometer out into the woods. And then they yelled really loud and they sort of like picked up sticks and threw things and smacked things around. And then they all came back in the middle and then they cried and hugged and it was very healing. So one of the things that I sometimes wonder about, I don't know what the hell happened there. I don't know what the science is behind it. I don't know if it's effective to treat something. But one of the things that I'm starting to realize is that our assumptions about how to heal mental hurt being tied to language, I think could be biased. Biased on the people that... So when Freud sat down with his patients, right, he was saying, okay, how do I heal the mind? But I don't know that he really understood that there was a bias to his answer there because he was working with a particular population. And so one of the things that
I see what you're saying.
And one of the things that I really wonder about, and I've been sort of like thinking about this more, there's a lot of research on something called normative male alexithymia, which is that men are colorblind to their emotional state and have difficulty describing it. Now, we sort of assume that this is a cultural thing that is bad that men are deficient in this way. But one of the things that I'm starting to wonder is, since it's normative and like all men have it, are the relationships that men have with their emotions fundamentally different? And the most natural way for a man to heal their emotions may not be through words. Now, I'm a big fan of words. I'm not saying words are bad.
Yeah, because I mean, no, I mean, words are definitely like they work and they're effective in that. But yeah, maybe there is just other avenues in that, you know, like
So
I've never heard of that. Yeah, like that's sorry.
I think men are very somatic, right? So if I ask you like what is tell me about existential dread. If I asked you where you felt it in your body and what it feels like, you would be very good at describing that, right? So this existential dread. So I would even ask you, when you were 10 years old and you decided to quit the sailing club, what did you feel in your body? I would bet money that you felt something here, and it was really, really strong, and this thing got control of you. And so the really fascinating thing is, if we look at some of these things, and I'll do this with my male patients who are alexithymic, I don't actually talk to them. I mean, I do talk to them. But what really is healing is that I'll help them work on their emotions in a physical way. And that seems to work really well. Usually you want to tie it all together. I think words are really powerful. There's a lot of good data about that. But I think
I mean, you don't have to be exclusive, you know,
right.
Like, but yeah, I mean, the physical, like actually just manifesting it in a physical way and just trying to pay attention to that as well. Like definitely, yeah, because like I mean, I can like pinpoint it where it's like it's here. That's where it is, you know. And I almost understanding that it could be helpful.
And there's some interesting science that sort of shows that our body and brain are like homeostatic, which means that if you mentally feel a certain way, you're going to physically feel a certain way. If you take away the mental emotion, the physical feeling will get better. Make sense?
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that the reverse is true. If we change the physical sensation, the emotion will get better. It's a two-way street. Everything in our body is a two-way street. And so I think especially especially for men, I'm beginning to wonder about other methods of treating mental burdens and utilizing the body more. I just wanted to share that because we were talking about Ireland and dudes and
no, you're grand. I mean something that probably ties into that is very much a stigma where it's like sometimes with mental health, especially if like post relationship, you've had a breakup or something. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna go hit the gym, you know? And it's like the physical activity and that can almost be a healing process for some folks.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
You could even tie that into looking at it for like just mental health and like what's actually going on there, you know?
Yeah, so I think that's a beautiful example. So I think one interesting thing is if you talk to people about breakups, right? Dudes can't say, how do you feel after a breakup? You can't say, well, I feel unlovable. I feel afraid for my future. I feel like, I'm not worthy as a human being. They don't say that. But what you can absolutely say is, I feel like someone kicked me in the balls, and everyone knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Right. She kicked me in the balls and she ripped this out. And like, I feel like they'll use this very physical language. And I've also seen that with people that I work with, when they are able to when they do hit the gym and they can literally carry weight, they get better at carrying weight. They seem to get better at carrying their emotional burdens too, which is why there's such a big emphasis on this. Even in some of these toxic masculine, classically toxic masculine communities.
Yeah.
But I think there's something there. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I really appreciated the conversation about Irish mental health and Irish perspectives and
I mean it's just a fascinating way of looking at it. Like I never really thought about that too much, but yeah, it's like just actual physical activity almost to bring out some of that and as a way of processing that. I've never heard of people just screaming in the field and that, which is wild as a concept.
Yeah, wild. So I mean there isn't data on that, so it seemed to be healing. That's the word I would use. I don't know if it's clinically beneficial.
If it works, that didn't scare, the local countryside.
I mean, it was scary too, but that was weird. It was like, it was scary, but anyway.
Oh God, we don't know.
Okay, so thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and good luck with everything. Do you want to just tell us where we can find you one last time before we?
Yeah, YouTube, rtgame, Twitch, rtgame. I play the video games.
Awesome, man.
Does the job.
That's great, dude. So definitely check out Daniel and RT Game, y'all. And, thank you very much for everything. Are you streaming now?
I'm not streaming at the moment,
Okay.
no. But I might go live in like a few minutes or something, just to kind of chill and play some games.
Okay. If you're going live, in a couple minutes, just let me DM me and we'll just raid you. And if you're not
Oh,
live
thank
when
you.
we're,
Oh, okay.
then we'll raid.
Yeah, I
somebody.
mean, thank you very much. That's very kind. Yeah, bless you.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for this. Hope you have a lovely day, yeah?
You too. Good luck with everything, man.
Thank you. Likewise. Take care.
Bye.